everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Founders and Leaders series. My name is Mike. I am the founder of Insight Platforms, and I'll be your host. I'm joined today by Reeves, who is the founder and CEO of Walr. Lewis, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Looking forward to this one.
Yeah, me too. And do you know what? I realized in the run-up to this, there's a part of me has been a little bit envious of you over the years because I started my first business in my early 40s and I wished that I'd done it a lot younger at that stage. Now, when did you first start your own business in the research space? How old were you, if I can ask that?
Yeah, great question. Well, the journey that became Savanta, I would have been 23 at the point in time where we started that journey, myself and three others on that journey. Super exciting journey that we had there. And then starting Walr on my own at the age of 28. But I would say, Mike, I'm quite envious of your hairline. So, maybe there's some trade-offs that come with starting businesses at young.
There you go. So tell us, what is Walr? Tell us a bit about the background and, how did it come to be built? What is it now?
Yeah, totally. So Walr exists to power the world's most successful market researchers. And we do that by providing a full end-to-end solution for their entire enterprise online quantitative data collection needs all in one place. And where that came from is spending my entire career working with market research agencies and buying quite a few as well on the Savanta journey, was able to see what yielded success in research agencies. And it came to me the insight that those market research businesses that spent the most time understanding their brands and their customers and focusing their energy there grew the fastest. Those that spent time trying to plow through some quite fragmented supply chains didn't really make any momentum going forward. And so the vision behind Walr is actually, how do we take that pain away from market research businesses? How do we give them the technology and the solutions so that what's become a very fragmented landscape can be a lot more seamless? And on a Sunday night, a researcher is not worried about which quotas are filling. They're worried about how excited they're going to get their brand on a Monday morning with the revolutionary new insights that they're going to provide. And so that's been the thesis behind Walr since day one. The proposition's evolved a lot, but that is really what sits at our heart. How do we drive the success of market researchers?
Okay, so you are effectively a data operations analytics engine that there's a sort of multiple layers. Then the agencies or the researchers that sit on top of that will have that expertise in, like you say, innovation, brand strategy, whatever it is, but you're the partner that's delivering all of that, the infrastructure underneath. Is that right?
Absolutely. And we stay very clearly in our lane. We provide data and our customers provide insight. And I think that's a really important delineation.
Okay, that's clear. So there's obviously a lot going on in the industry broadly. How is your business changing with all of this?
Yeah, evolving a huge amount. AI has been fantastic for our organization. We talk in our business that market researchers never complain about getting their data faster, so long as all of the critical hygiene factors, such as data quality, are met. And I think what's amazing, certainly with our use of agents and as we've built an agentic layer on top of our platform, is just the speed. Tasks that historically took multiple days can now be delivered in seconds. The scale of management of projects can be managed at such a more granular level on such higher quantums constantly 24/7. And so the ability to deliver consistency and speed and confidence to our clients is greater than it's ever been, which is really exciting. Improving your product using technology and using, if anything, less manpower, I think as an entrepreneur is always the dream.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's unpack that because that's a buzzword that is, the word of the year, probably agentic. For a lot of people, they'll hear it and hear different things. What does it mean in the context of your business and why is it a game changer? Can you put some flesh on the bones?
Sure, absolutely. So Walr's business is really in two layers. We've got our platform layer, which is an end-to-end platform to allow the building of surveys to as great an enterprise level and complexity level as you can dream of. The access of audiences, that's delivering in over 100 markets, 20 million completes a year, and then the structuring of data. The platform allows you to do all of that. One of the interesting learnings on the Wallet journey is actually how many of our customers want the efficiency, but want us to push the buttons for them. And they don't necessarily want to learn another platform. They just want their data accurately and quickly. And so the agentic layer for Walr has really been about how do we get to the finish line faster and more accurate. So taking tasks that historically humans did in that operational layer and using agents instead. Very simple. Building surveys, managing and running audiences and varying incentives, and then structuring data, but also actually from a data component, allowing clients access themselves. So if they want to run their own model through the raw data that we create for them, we allow them to hook up there and they can have at it. They can compare all the data sets that exist within our platform all in one place. So really it's around operational efficiency and operational scale.
Okay. So you talked about the speed benefits of agentic approaches, but you also talked about increased accuracy. Now, for some people, they'll see a bit of a trade-off here, or they've maybe been bitten by the fact that they've tried to implement something as an agent and it's gone rogue, or it's hallucinated or made decisions that it shouldn't have done. Can you talk a little bit about the accuracy side of things then? How do you balance that tension between obviously wanting the speed benefits and getting it all right?
Yeah, so look, I think the first principle is building our own agents on top of our own proprietary platform. And that way you've got a lot more control. We essentially, if I look at survey programming, we've got 3 layers, 2 agentic, 1 human. The first layer is the agent that takes the questionnaire and transforms that into the script that is ingested into our survey building platform. The second agent is a verification agent. Essentially, that's marking the homework of the first agent to say, how confident am I in the delivery of going from point A to point B? And the outcome of the second agent is to alert the human being to where they need to spend their time. And so I think what this allows us to do is have the same level of human oversight, the same level of trust within that process, but just much more sped up. So if there are any elements within that survey where they are relatively complex and the agents aren't quite perfect just yet, the human is able to get straight to them, but the human doesn't need to go through the 40 questions before they got to the 3 that they need to aid on. They can go directly to that point in time. And what I would say to people that maybe have a sort of slight concern around agents is if you set up an agent correctly and you think about this maybe slightly more from a pure automation perspective, rather than letting an agent free to use its own mind on a task, it's very repetitive. And us human beings, when it comes to repetitive tasks, are not always perfect. We certainly do make mistakes. And so if you correctly align your agent and your automation task, it is going to do the same thing each and every time. So get it right the first time and those benefits flow through. But at Walr, we are huge believers in the value of a human being, and closing the loop with a human is critical to knowing we are putting the right product out for our customers.
Okay. Really interesting. So I feel like there's a 3-into-1 in roles there. You've taken a survey scripter, that expertise, and agentified it. You've taken a reviewer and have that role as an agentic solution. And then you've got the human who's going to then focus on the short list of outputs that come out of that. So presumably, per team member, you're starting to see, you're amplifying efficiencies at this stage, or is it too early to really see that?
No, we totally are. And I think when we look at project volumes managed by individuals, they've pretty much doubled in the last 6 months. And I think the best statistic coming out of our business, maybe not directly related to market research, but we wrote 70% more lines of code in Q1 compared to Q4. And I think those sorts of efficiency gains not only are true of our engineering team, but also across the operational board. That's the sort of benefit that we are seeing.
Yeah. Okay. You were seeing a lot of headlines about the impact that the coding tools are having on, like you say, on development engineering teams. But it sounds like that's actually flowing through into operations as well. It's not just an academic thing.
100%. And I think what's been amazing to see in our organization is how many people have been willing to pick up that baton and go and create tools. And yes, we've got 3 simple areas where we use agents, but we've probably got well over 100 different agents for different use cases. And maybe less than 50% of them were actually built by our innovation team, which is our product and engineering business. So we've got people within our operations team that actually have taken it upon themselves to go, can I automate this task for myself to make myself more scalable? And that's really exciting. It comes with a requirement for a certain amount of governance to make sure that everything is behaving correctly and data is looked after correctly. But it's exciting that we are now in an era where it's not just engineering teams that can move the dial from a technology perspective.
Yeah. I'm interested. Your use of the word automation suggests that some of these are actually, quite tightly, if there's then that deterministic sort of workflows that obviously, you don't have the same risk of creativity, hallucination going off piste. So how do you get that? I guess maybe this is an unanswerable question, but I'm intrigued as to the blending of the generative components of an agentic, reasoning model with some of those deterministic rules so that you kind of get the best of both worlds. Have you got areas where you're able to blend those two things together?
Well, I think a lot of that comes through training and learning. And so we are very fortunate at Walr that we've asked now in excess of 1.5 billion questions through our platform. That means we've explored quite a few different question types. And when we train our agents on that data, it means more than 99.9% of the time, they are seeing something they've seen before. And so that then means that we've signed off. The checking agent has verified what they've done. We re-educate in the event that we do the wrong thing from an agentic perspective. And so actually, it's more about that sort of memory recognition rather than taking on a task from scratch. And I think we're in a very fortunate component of the market research flow where it's very clear what right is. We're not in the world of insight, where I think that there is a lot more of a gray area around exactly what is a great insight and what's the insight for this data and what is the relevant context and what do my stakeholders want to know. And there's so many more variables. Hey, I have a Word document with questions on it. I need to have an online survey that represents exactly the same questions in the structure that the Word document desired. Much more easy to validate exactly what is required of that task.
Yeah. Okay. It's fascinating how quickly the world is evolving. I don't know if you saw a few weeks ago that Kantar's global head of people is now global head of people and agents, where you're having a kind of unified oversight of all of this. And the way that, the way that you're framing it does sound, there's a kind of side by side, hand in hand.
And I think, Mike, that's a great point. And what is so exciting to me is how this is really growing beyond technology departments. As you mentioned with Kantar, it's their human resources department that is owning agents. Each of our departments, we have a lot of AI going on and agentic workflows within our sales team of how work gets booked in through to how it gets pushed into our systems. Those agents are run by those teams. It really allows us to expand and release the shackles of historic IT and technology restraints, which is very exciting.
So I was just trying to do some quick maths in my head. I'm normally not very impressed by big numbers in isolation, but 1.5 billion questions over, did you say 6 years since you founded the business?
Just over 5, at the moment.
Right. Okay. So 300 million questions a year, 6 million questions. It's a fairly healthy clip, and you're right, to build a quite a substantial training, body of expertise to go and build those agents.
Yes, and needless to say, Mike, we didn't do 300 million questions in our first year, so we're a bit of a run rate faster than that. But look, and I think this is absolutely key: is how do we keep our agents as relevant as possible? And training is key. And we're very fortunate as a business that collects data. We create a huge amount of data. And so that is a great resource for us to make those tools better and faster, particularly the sort of metadata that sits behind every type of question that we ask.
Yeah. Okay. We've talked a lot about the agentic changes that are coming to the industry, and we're obviously still in the early stages of that. It feels like that's almost the kind of the mega trend that's driving substantial change across all parts of it. But Are there other trends that sit either beneath that or feed into it? Any other trends that you see across the research and insight space that you think are noteworthy or are having an impact on your business?
Totally. I think what's really intriguing is a huge amount of innovation has gone on in the quant space over the last, 20 years since I've been in the industry, that's for sure. What I think is intriguing is the amount of investment and the amount of innovation taking part in qual. And qual at scale in the last sort of 12 to 18 months has really caught fire. If anyone's been on the conference scene lately, there's a lot of new logos around, a lot of well-backed logos as well. And I think that's a fascinating space to see how kind of the two worlds collide, because that quant scale requires lots of people paying attention, lots of people turning their cameras on, and really intriguing to see how that mass unstructured data can create value for brands. So an intriguing space. Lots of players today. Will be interesting to see what that market looks like in 2 or 3 years' time. But that's been a fascinating trend.
Yeah.
I think the worlds are colliding. We're a business that provides a huge amount of audiences for participation in market research, and we've certainly seen those organizations demand audiences at scale all across the world, but not really an output and a product that we lean into.
Okay. Yeah, I think we see on insight platforms, a lot of the startups, the innovation, the storytelling around it. I don't know. My sense is that there's been about $250 million, maybe $300 million investment flow into that particular category in the AI moderation and, unstructured interviews, quality scale, whatever people call it. So there's obviously a lot of expectation there. The other part where there's been an explosion of new solutions is in the polarizing space of synthetic digital twins, AI personas. There's obviously lots of different language that hasn't quite settled down around that yet. So, on the one hand, we're kind of turning the researcher or the interviewer into an AI agent. And then on the other side, we're creating agents that represent the participants in research. How are you approaching synthetic? Are you starting to incorporate it? Are you treating it as, one part of the workflow? How does that work for you guys at Walr?
Yeah, we've lent into it pretty heavily. I would say the main starting point has been more from a digital twins perspective, where we've done a lot more of our own internal research and preparation. And I would say customer demand has led us to be delivering. From a synthetic panel perspective, some of the numbers that we mentioned earlier, we're incredibly well placed to play in that market. We are certainly running some of our own trials in that space. What I would once again say is we've had some really great conversations with our customers. We've not seen too many customers just yet take that leap of faith. And actually, I think when you've got the reach that a business like ours has got, the ability to very quickly, thanks to our agentic layer, generate data of high trust and high validity in a methodology that has been trusted now for a good few decades in terms of online survey completes, that solution is still winning out. But we always have to be agile as a business. When I started this company during COVID, we certainly didn't have agentic layers going on. Had a little bit of automation. And so maybe if we're talking, Mike, in another 5 years' time, we might be predominantly providing synthetic audiences rather than human-led audiences. I think market research moves at its own speed. And I've seen many companies try and move it faster and have struggled. And actually, I think it's about getting that balance right, being ready for the change, but not trying to force the market to change, because sometimes that can be a bit difficult.
Yeah. Well, why do you think your customers have been reticent? What are some of the arguments you're hearing about why it's not appropriate or they don't want to?
Look, I think we power a lot of political polling, for example.
Right.
And I think that when, the accuracy of those opinions is so key, it feels like quite a leap of faith to move to a model with perhaps slightly less statistical accuracy. We all know that human beings can be flawed in their responses. And does everyone tell us exactly who they're going to vote for in the next election? I'm not sure. But I think that feels like a bit of a leap of faith in that area. Certainly clients that have got maybe more stable data sets that are highly repetitive have been more keen to explore where there's a lot of training data available and we can really build in that accuracy. We can very quickly test the accuracy. With an election, you only get to test it every 4 or 5 years to see if your model is correct. And if you get it wrong once, you're sort of a decade out of being able to check back again. So I think there's a little bit of our work that it's not so easy to measure so quickly. The work that is more measurable is probably where the demand seems the highest.
Yeah, I think last week or the week before, I think Nate Silver came out, strongly against using any synthetically generated data for polling purposes. And I mean, I've yet to see the paper and the work behind it, but it's, certainly contentious and, lots. I think the settling out of the language around it, the terminology, the methodologies and the validation has a long way to go in that people don't quite know what they're describing.
Yeah.
You'll talk about digital twins, and people will call the same thing a persona. Other people, that's very much a one-to-one mapping. So it's, it's not straightforward yet, I think, for people to get a handle of, where is it appropriate, how does it work, and when should it be avoided? So, yeah.
100%. Yeah. But look, market research, we're very curious and we have that sort of academic mindset. So I'm certain we'll figure it out, and I'm certain we'll have some white papers to validate our approaches. We're just not quite there yet. And I think it's really exciting frontier and one that I'm intrigued to see where we get to with.
Yeah. You mentioned the pace of change and, things may be different in a few years' time. This is always a hard question to frame, but if you could forecast out 3 years from now, what will have stayed the same? What do you think will be different in the ecosystem, in the way that research gets done, or the types of businesses that are maybe more successful, less successful at that point?
Yeah, look, I think the one thing that a long tenure in market research teaches you is things never change as quickly as we might all predict. I was there really at the start of the end of CATI and the beginning of online research. And actually, we as a business still do some telephone interviewing, and that world maybe not growing that rapidly, but it's still thriving and still successful. There's been big data, there's been social media data, there's been the move to mobile. And actually, I still see far too many surveys that are not mobile ready yet. And so I think as much as we might predict a certain speed of change, and I do think AI is the most disruptive technology that the world has ever seen, let alone market research, which will definitely inspire faster change. I do think that at the end of the day, market research is about really high quality human opinions, and that will remain. The speed of getting to the answers has to get faster, and the organizations that facilitate getting to that answer faster will be the winners and will be the ones that continue to thrive and succeed. I do think some will fall by the wayside. Those that are not necessarily digitally enabled, that are not able to get to that answer faster, will fall over, because the option of I can get an immediate answer from my LLM versus I can wait 8 weeks to have a market research answer come through will lose. Now, 3 days versus instant, maybe that is right now good enough. I think it needs to be 3 hours versus an instant response from an unvalidated methodology. So I think speed will be key, and speed requires digital infrastructure to execute upon. But I don't think we will see a cliff. I think we will see a more steady decline of one and a steady increase of the other.
Yeah. It's very heartening to hear what you talk about in terms of the agentic workflows, the creativity, what's happening around the kind of the core of data collection and connecting humans to businesses, organizations, because an awful lot of the pitches that you see or the press releases that come out from some of the VCs that have invested in, in startups in the space are all about how research these days takes 3 months and it's very slow and backward looking and, obsessed with methodology. And the reality is, actually, it seems there's an awful lot of innovation at the frontier to do some of those implementations, like you say, the agentic workflows, the speeding things, they're recognizing in-house as well as within the agencies and supply chain that speed is a primary driver of decision-making.
I totally have to agree, but I think, Mike, never at the cost of respondent experience. And I do also fear that we get further and further away from that component. We've got a good half an hour into this conversation and have not spoken about data quality, which has obviously been very topical for the last few years. what's really intriguing when you've got billions of data points and you can understand how the impact of a poorly designed survey has on a respondent versus, the sheer volume of, let's call them bad actors coming into surveys, much bigger impact. And this is where I'd love us to lean into AI and innovation. How do we create incredible experiences? We've seen the rest of the world change. We've seen Matt Damon came out speaking about Netflix very recently saying, you now have to describe what's going on in this film 4 times in the first 20 minutes to garner people's attention. Yet our surveys just aren't changing. And I think that there is so much that we can do to garner richer data, richer quality responses from human beings that are prepared to give us their time to these new technologies, which we can deliver faster, but we should never do that at the cost of the quality and that experience, which I think is so key to delivering the value in research.
You're right. Designed for the people who are actually half watching Netflix as they're completing the survey.
You've got it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, a very similar point was made. In fact, I've heard it in multiple places. But a couple of weeks ago, we had a webinar with Dig Insights and DQC, who were talking about this kind of industry standard more for data quality. But the most important point that emerged was the one that you're describing, which is actually designed for engagement, designed for good attention, and the hygiene of not even making it mobile friendly to be able to complete the survey. Those types of things are quite astonishing in this day and age. So, yeah.
Yeah, look, when you see the data within our organization, you look at what's truly an attention span. All of a sudden, surveys, as they go over 20 minutes, the dropout rates, but also the post-survey disqualification rates grow exponentially. Now, did suddenly someone decide to become a bad respondent after 20 minutes, or were they just bored? And I think that that's a real battle that we've got. Yep. Akin to how you mentioned with synthetic data, we've not quite nailed the terminology. I, for one, think data quality has been far too broad brush. And we really need to break that down into true categorizations of why we are not getting the accuracy within the data that we desire. And that will give us more levers to pull to solve that problem. One of which is certainly respondent experience and being totally joined up from survey through audience through data at Walr. We're able to see that firsthand and really help our clients design experiences that yield the highest quality of data.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, but the same way that synthetically breaking down into the different methodologies, the data quality, does segregate into better design experiences, outright fraud, error rates, inattention, those other buckets.
The biggest thing also is someone that owns and builds and invests a lot of money in proprietary panels is longevity of respondents, right? We can get good respondents into this flow, but if we upset them and give them terrible experiences, they don't come back. And I tell you, the guys who are going to constantly come back are the fraudsters. They will run through brick walls. Great respondents won't. And so we have to have a mind on how we make those experiences pretty seamless to ensure that the good guys stay around and we can use great technology to block the bad guys from getting in.
Yeah, great. Okay, good. Well, we started with me referencing the fact that, your original, the first business you founded, you were comparatively young. So you've got quite a track record of building businesses, integrating with others, acquiring others, scaling globally. What are some of the lessons that you've picked up along the way? I guess, big learnings in building these businesses over the years.
Yeah, definitely. The one thing I think you can never underestimate is the impact of change and scale. And if you want to move quickly, your business will evolve rapidly, and the ways of working, the talent requirements along that journey do change. And we've certainly got stuck at some of the traditional hurdles. You sort of get to 50 people and suddenly things don't work. You get to 100 people, we get to 200 people. And I think these are all points where you have to lean into evolution. Sometimes when you're going really quickly, they might be 6 months apart and you go, hey, it was working perfectly 6 months ago. We did all those changes and it was great. And why is it now not working? And I think that's something you can never not lean into enough is change and evolution and evolving with the business. I also think for all of these journeys and, Walr has been published in a number of awards and fast growth lists, and that's all great. I think from the outside, that can look quite intimidating. I think from the inside, entrepreneurs will all tell you it is not a smooth path. The curve does not start in the bottom left and end in the top right. It is a roller coaster of a ride to get there. And so don't make the highs too high, don't make the lows too low. Keep moving forward. That there is always tomorrow, and I think that's a really critical piece of advice that some people super close to me at times when the next step has seemed very hard, they've encouraged me along the way, and then that makes the step after that easier, and the step after that easier again. And so keep moving, and even if it looks like everyone else is just rocketing to the top right, they probably aren't in reality, and you're probably doing all right.
They're not really crushing it. So yeah. But yeah, a good bit of Kipling for modern business leaders. Treat those two imposters just the same. So yeah.
Amen. Great poem on that one.
Are there any mistakes, any missteps that that you like to own up to, or to help others anticipate and avoid them?
Definitely. I think embracing change not fast enough has been something that whenever we've then made the change, you've gone, that was absolutely the right thing to do. Why didn't we do that 6 months ago? And generally speaking, your gut is telling you 6 months prior that you need to make that decision, but emotional factors probably hold you back. So definitely the advice from that will be following your gut. I think as a first-time entrepreneur, lots of people say this, flow is absolutely king, and stay incredibly close to that. I'm sure we're not the only organization that's had a hairy moment or two in our earlier years, and that can be incredibly stressful and really detract from building great products and providing great service to customers. So keeping hotly on top of cash flow and having fantastic finance teams is really, really key. The other area I would say is, in our world, be better market researchers. So we've definitely fallen foul of thinking we know what people want without asking them. And we've built products that we think are brilliant and spent a lot of time, a lot of money on building those products, and they've been used very sparingly. Every single time that we listen to customers and maybe get a representative base and listen to a few of them, we've built products that have been loved and have been used time and time again. And so, yes, we're in the world of market research. We should know better, but we should ask people questions and do our research, and it leads to better outcomes.
I love that. What a great point at which to finish there. The physician heal thyself. Every culture has a different variation of this, but my favorite, I think, is the Egyptian phrase. Obviously, I don't really speak Arabic, but the translated version is something like, the carpenter's door is all knackered and kicked in, or something, so
yeah,
you're right. Researchers need to get better at actually asking customers, ensuring they understand what their needs are. Wonderful advice for budding entrepreneurs, for people starting out in the industry. I think great overview of some of the big trends. I love the framing of actually there's dozens of agents that can originate in different parts of the business, not just out of engineering and development, but these are actually living as part of what would have been human workflows previously, that, different takes on the role of synthetic and sort of qualitative AI moderated interviews, how those two things fit together. So we've covered a lot of ground in just over half an hour. So Lewis, thank you very much indeed for your time, for sharing your insights. And we have a bunch of other great entrepreneurs, leaders, founders of insights businesses, research tech businesses coming up in this series. Do check back for future episodes. We have plenty more on the slate. So Lewis of Walr, CEO, founder of Walr, and seasoned entrepreneur at a tender age still in this industry. Thank you very much for your insights, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Brilliant, Mike. Really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. See you soon. Bye-bye.